be used to supplement what's being done at the local level. So I think we do have a once-in-a-generation opportunity with more than one pot of funds that we can put to.
City Council of the City of Louisville, and we are, I guess, at the outset here, taking a roll call, so.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Here.
Councilmember Fahey. Here. Mayor Lay.
Here.
Councilmember Cooperman. Councilmember Hefner.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton. Here. Councilmember Kern. Here.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Why don't we stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. All right. Our first item of business tonight is an executive session for two purposes. One concerns pending litigation, the other concerns real property acquisitions and dispositions. I'll let Melinda take it from here.
Okay. As noted on the meeting agenda, the city attorney and city manager are requesting an executive session for the purpose of consultation with an attorney representing the city with respect to pending litigation pursuant to Section 52D of the city's Home Rule Charter and CRS Section 246402-4B, and discussing real property acquisitions and dispositions pursuant to Section 52C of the Home Rule Charter and CRS Section 246402-4A, specifically as to appraisals and other value estimates and strategy. Prior to entertaining any motion, the interim city clerk will read a statement required by the city code.
It is the policy of the city to conduct public business and meetings open to the public. While in executive session, it is inappropriate to take straw votes, keep minutes, or to make any final decisions. It is the duty of each member to ensure that executive sessions are conducted in strict compliance with this ordinance, state and federal law, and any applicable provisions of the state and federal constitutions. If at any time the scope, nature, or parameter of this executive session goes beyond the publicly stated topic, it is the responsibility of the council to terminate and cease any further deliberation within the executive session and return to the public meeting. Only those topics described in city ordinances may be discussed in an executive session. Those topics are summarized as follows. 1, where federal or state law requires that the information being discussed remain confidential. 2, certain personnel matters involving only employees directly appointed by the city council and other personnel matters upon request of the city manager or mayor. 3, consideration of water rights and real property acquisitions and dispositions, but only as to appraisals, value estimates, and strategy. 4, legal consultation with an attorney representing the city with respect to pending litigation.
Regarding the authority for the executive session, Section 52D of the Charter authorizes an executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation. An executive session for this purpose is also authorized by the Open Meetings Law, Section 246402-4B of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Section 52C of the Charter authorizes an executive session for the purpose of discussing real property acquisitions and dispositions, but only as to appraisals and other estimates of value and strategy. An executive session for these purposes is also authorized by the Open Meetings Law, Section 246402-4A of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The request involves pending litigation regarding the Marshall Fire and a potential acquisition of real property. With that, you may entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation and real property acquisitions and dispositions, and the executive session also include City Manager Diane Langley, Deputy City Manager Samuel Fox, Community Development Director Rob Zaccaro, and Deputy City Attorney Melinda Colley.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, can we take a roll call?
Mayor Lay.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey. Yes. Councilmember Hefner.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Kern.
Yes.
Okay, the council will now adjourn to executive session. We have a regular meeting starting at 6 with the proviso that it may take either a little bit It may take a little longer than that, depending how long the executive session goes. We will be back as soon as possible. I think there'll be a notice that'll be up on the screen, and appreciate your patience. Thank you. Is Josh on?
Yes.
Okay. Pardon me? Okay. Because we've got a quorum, so let's do it. Yeah. Right. We are back from our executive session, and Melinda, why don't you go ahead and.
Mayor and council, as noted on the meeting agenda, the executive session was for the purpose of discussing a potential real property acquisition and potential, and as well as litigation. The council did have that discussion and no formal action is required.
Thank you very much. Right, our next item is approval of the agenda. Do we have, well, before that, I just to be recognize, it's at 6:41 now. Recognize that quite a number of you have probably been waiting patiently here since 6 or close to it, maybe before that, and we appreciate your patience. It's an important executive session, but we recognize that people have other things to do this evening, and appreciate the time that you've had to spend waiting, and same thing with people who are online. So I just wanted to say that. I wish there was some way that we could predict always how long those executive sessions are going to be. We started this one at 5, and obviously it took longer than we expected, but at any rate. All right, do we have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda and items on the consent agenda. If you're interested in speaking on topics that are not on our agenda or are on the consent agenda, please fill out a form if you're here and provide it to the city clerk or the interim clerk. And if you're online, I guess, yeah, you can let us know. Pardon me, raise your hand, right? And you'll get called on by the city clerk. You have 3 minutes or up to 3 minutes to speak. If you want to pool your time with one or more people, and they are here in the gallery or online, and they have agreed with you, you can speak for up to 6 minutes. You don't have to speak for 3 or 6 minutes. Speak for much less than that if you want to. All opinions are welcome, and we just ask everyone to maintain a decorum so that people are not deterred from speaking by clapping or booing or whatnot. So with that, do we have anybody who's signed up for public comment? No. All right. Then let's go to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Council informational comments and committee reports. Do we have any council comments or informational reports from meetings that they have attended? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. So I had the opportunity to attend the Colorado Municipal League conference, the annual conference, the CML conference. It was great. I did everything I could to represent Louisville in the best possible light. I have to admit, it was received quite well. A lot of people were super excited. They're like, yes, Louisville's in the room. And we're there to vote on who officers were going to be in the CML. So thank you, actually, for everybody who gave input. Made a lot of good connections, continuing that work to, get the word out and just kind of to translate to council and the community that there are other communities all around Colorado so enlightened by the decision we've all made in our community with fire hardening and resiliency and sustainability, and exciting to partner with all of us in that process as we continue down the journey, getting better and better at that. So that's my report.
Thank you. Others? Okay. I have a couple of things. One, wanted to say that I personally, and I think quite a number of other people, enjoyed the fireworks display on July 4th. Big success, I think. And thanks to Post 111 at American Legion for helping lead that, doing the hard work of putting together the fireworks. And one of these days, maybe I'll learn how to help, because it just looks like such fun to do, but they did a nice job. The second thing I wanted to mention is there is a person in our community, Erica Mahoney, and I think some of you know her. She is, her father was killed in the King Super shooting, and she has done a podcast which is called Senseless. And I don't know, I am not going to read off the URL here, but I may post it in some of the places that I post online, and maybe we'll talk to staff and see if there's any way to put something up about it. It's extraordinarily worthwhile. She's a former NPR reporter in California, and she's, is a big monumental issue in our larger community, and she's put together a really good bit of work in the healing process. So anyway, any other comments? All right, let's move on to the city manager's report.
All right, thank you. So tomorrow night, we have the Ward 3 meeting with council members Hamilton and Hefner at the Recreation Center. On Thursday, we have Sunflower and Enclave Park ribbon cuttings. So 10 o'clock at Sunflower, 11 o'clock at Enclave. And also just to note, Thursday night is the RMMA Part 150 study open house in Broomfield. This is related to the airport. The city receives a lot of complaints related to the noise associated with the airport, so this is the opportunity for the public to hear more about that. And I just want to address the utility billing incident that occurred last week, and I do have a statement from the city's third-party billing company. And so the principal of the company noted that their partnership with the city of Louisville spans more than a decade, and we hold that relationship in the highest regard. With respect to the recent incident involving the utility billing system, please know that we are actively working with the city to address the issue and are committed to ensuring it is fully resolved. We value your trust and remain dedicated to maintaining the integrity and reliability you expect from us. Thank you for your continued partnership and understanding. So, thank you.
Thank you. And the city has taken some steps as well in response to all of that. Can you describe real quickly what those have been?
Yes, so unfortunately, everybody's password was reset. And so if you log into the utility billing system, you're going to have to request a new password. You'll get a temporary password, and then you can reset your password. We will also no longer be distributing informational flyers through the company via email. The city will be distributing the informational flyers, so they will no longer be sending out any attachments because they mistakenly attached the wrong attachment to the email that went out. And then we are working with them to provide 1 year of credit monitoring for those customers that were impacted. They're finalizing their agreement with a party to do that, and we expect to be able to release that information hopefully tomorrow to all of the impacted customers.
We can move on to regular business. First in line is the Parks and Recreation Month proclamation. And Councilmember Fahey, are you going to take that?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. This is the Parks and Recreation Month designation for July 2025. Whereas parks, recreation, open space, and golf is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Louisville. And whereas parks via its 37 designated parks and 350 acres of maintained parkland, recreation via the world-class Louisville Recreation and Senior Center, serving over 400,000 guests annually. Open space via its 2,000 acres of open space designated land and 32 miles of developed trail system, and golf via the Coal Creek Golf Course and the nearly 50,000 rounds played and top enrollment junior golf program in the state of Colorado, promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near Louisville and its public lands and recreation facilities. And whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's disease. And whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, walking, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation is the leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition services, and education, and whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf programming and education activities, such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, junior golf, and environmental education, are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Golf is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks, open space, golf course, and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month. And whereas the City of Louisville recognizes the benefits derived from parks, recreation, open space, and golf resources, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of Louisville that July 2025 is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Louisville, dated this 8th day of July 2025. And I would move that we approve this proclamation and move forward.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
Sure.
On the proclamation, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the wonderful work that our Recreation Parks staff has done for years. And I am particularly pleased to reiterate the announcement that our city manager made that there is going to be a ribbon cutting on Thursday morning for Sunflower and Enclave Parks that have been beautifully restored since the fire damage. And I'm just inviting everyone to come and attend and clap your hands that we got something good done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. All right. Next item of business is ordinance number 1898, series 2025, an ordinance approving the grant of a cable franchise to Comcast of California, Colorado, Florida, Oregon, Inc., and approving a cable franchise agreement between Comcast of California, Colorado, Florida, Oregon, Inc., and the city of Louisville, Colorado. Tonight we'll be hearing staff report of the ordinance. We're not going to be opening the public hearing or taking public comment. Council can ask questions this evening and suggest amendments for second reading or instruct staff to return with additional information. So there'll be a public hearing. It's just not going to be tonight unless we vote not to send it on to public hearing, but we're going to deal with that now. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor. We actually have no staff report tonight. We have a third-party legal counsel joining us for the second reading and public hearing, and we'd like to defer the presentation for amenable.
Good. All right, and any comments, questions, thoughts, anything to add tonight? Okay. Can we get a, let's see, I move the ordinance number 1898, series 2025, pass on first reading and the public hearing be set for
July 22nd?
July 22nd, 6 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next is ordinance number 1899, series 2025, an ordinance amending titles 4 and 14 of the Louisville Municipal Code to establish maximum speed limit for bicycles on bike paths and trails within the city. This is a first reading and setting public hearing. I believe we have, do we have staff presentation? Yeah. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Rafael Gutierrez. I proudly serve as your police chief. The proposed amendment before you is an amendment to the Open Space Title 4 and Parks and Rec Title 14 of the City of Louisville's Municipal Code, and would establish a maximum speed limit of 15 miles per hour on paths and trails within the city. The amendment would be another strategy to promote safe and responsible bicycle riding on our parks, trails, and paths. The proposed speed limit aligns our city with neighboring jurisdictions that also have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit on their paths and trails. Many of our paths span across jurisdictions, and this will provide some uniformity within our area. The proposed amendment would prohibit riders from operating either a bicycle or electric bicycle on city-owned and officially designated bike paths and trails at speeds in excess of 15 miles per hour. The topic relates directly to concerns relayed by members of our community regarding traffic safety. On May 28th and August 27th of 2024, special meetings were held with council to discuss the development of a strategy to address concerns. Several possible options were discussed specific to bicycle safety, which included imposing a speed limit on paths and trails, creating additional sidewalk dismount zones, requiring e-bike rider licensing, and a general prohibition of bicycles and e-bikes on sidewalks. We also discussed creating citywide initiatives to develop a more robust educational campaign on bicycle safety. After having those discussions, city staff from several departments created a safety campaign that engaged multiple stakeholders from the community, including local bicycle vendors, community and student groups, the Boulder Valley School District, and various city departments. The police department placed a greater focus on education and enforcement efforts to increase responsible riding and safe practices for all users of the roadway. The educational campaign and focused enforcement will continue, and we currently have events planned with the school district for back to school time in the next couple of months. Staff does not recommend the creation of additional sidewalk dismount zones beyond what currently exists in our municipal code, nor do we recommend a general prohibition of riding bicycles on all sidewalks in the city. This is due to concerns that were relayed and noted during last year's special meetings about the potential for moving children from the sidewalks onto roadways. There would also be additional associated costs with installing signs and markings for these additional dismount areas. Staff also believes that licensing and age restrictions would be impractical to implement and difficult to manage for our municipality. However, staff would support those changes to the state traffic code. We've heard similar concerns from other jurisdictions about e-bike safety, and we believe that approaching these changes at the state level would be preferable. Some things for you to consider would be the enforceability of the amendment and the potential cost and staff time associated with the posting of new signage and markings. It's also important to acknowledge that there is a relatively low percentage of incidents on our roadways involving e-bikes or bicycles. The last data that we compiled show that conflicts involving bicycles on our roadways represent about 3% of the accidents that are reported or investigated. Unfortunately, we don't have any data on conflicts that occur on our trail systems or paths because those incidents are not always reported, nor are they investigated. The state, because they do not fit the state definition of a traffic accident, so we don't have the data to support what conflicts are existing currently on our paths or trails. While I'm sure that there are conflicts that occur on our pathways, we just are unable to provide any quantification of those incidents. This amendment supports the city's environmental sustainability lens because it does encourage multimodal forms of transportation and provides guidance related to reasonable and prudent speeds for bicyclists who utilize the parks, paths, and trail systems within our city. Regardless of the passage of this amendment, staff will continue with our public educational campaigns and enforcement efforts. The implementation of this ordinance will require public education and communication, and our communications teams are prepared to push out the messaging about the new speed limit if it's passed. The associated costs of posting signage, path and trail markings, and potentially acquiring additional speed detection equipment have not been determined pending the passage of this amendment. The locations and the number of signs and markings needed is also undetermined at this time. The cost of implementation may come from either the police department, Parks, Rec, and Open Space, or Public Works budget. There also may be some ability to draw a portion from each of those departments to help support the implementation. Alternatives to passing this amendment would be to allow city staff to continue with its educational and safety campaign and focusing on promoting safe riding habits. Staff is uncertain of the full benefits that will be gained through the passage of this amendment. However, it does align with our neighboring jurisdictions, and it does promote what we believe to be a safe and prudent speed on our trails and paths. Staff did have some concerns regarding which department would be responsible for enforcement, and we've determined the enforcement of this ordinance would fall solely on the police department and its officers, and not on the open space rangers. Your packet contains the proposed ordinance amendment language, as well as the informational update presented to council during the special meeting on August 27th of last year. That update contains accident data, enforcement process considerations, community outreach efforts, information regarding state vehicle registration requirements, and other information on staff efforts that have been taken to this point. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm here and available for those.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the chief? Yes. Councilmember Dickey.
Just from a basic implementation, are you envisioning notifying people of the speed limit, like at entry and exit points of paths, rather than like every 200 yards of a path? Mostly like as you enter a path, you get that information, and then you may not get that, like to save costs, or do you imagine having multiple signs along a path as reminders?
Yeah, I think we'd have to sit with Public Works and the traffic engineers to determine like what distance they should be spaced at. I think that entry points to the trail system would make sense. I don't know that we have to install them every so many 100 feet or so, but I think as long as they're posted, as long as it's visible and people are aware that the speed limit exists, I think we would look at that. But again, I would probably reach out to traffic engineers to see what distance they would need to be spaced at and what entry points would make the most sense.
And my only other question is, do you envision putting police officers on bike paths with radar guns to issue tickets for speeding bicycles, or is it more of a information and self-policing kind of strategy?
Yeah, I think the strategy is more to promote a safe speed. And I think those that are responsible riders and users of the paths and trails are going to adhere to the speed limits. I don't envision placing officers on pathways or trails, doing speed detection or things of that nature. They have other areas of the city that are probably a little bit higher in terms of their need and the resource allocation. But it is possible. We do have e-bikes, and the officers are encouraged to use those bikes on the trail system. And so there may be times where they can use portable speed detection equipment to measure, kind of spot check speeds and things of that nature. But I don't envision that being kind of a high priority to place people on these trails and pathways on a much regular basis just for speed enforcement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Cooperman.
Thanks. I have a few questions. One, to follow up on the last question, just to use myself as an example. I don't ride on our trails as much as our roads, but I do not ride with a speedometer. And so I don't actually know how fast I'm going on my bicycle or any of my bicycles. And so I wonder, how does that play into, giving someone a ticket when they actually don't have any equipment that would give them a sense for their speed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that most e-bikes are now being equipped with the an ability to measure their speed. But you're right, there are bicycles, pedal bicycles that may not have that capability. And I think that comes into the officer being able to use their discretion and kind of have that conversation. If an officer registers a speed that's over 15 miles an hour and the person reasonably did not know that they were going that fast, I think that's an educational opportunity compared to a citation. Should a citation be issued, I think that would be probably elements that might be able to be raised through the municipal court if they felt like it was not justified, or if there was other extenuating circumstances to avoid that citation.
Okay. And then I'm wondering, which of our neighboring communities has such speed limits?
So we're following the Lafayette's model. They have the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on trails that do adjoin our trails and that reach into our area. I believe Broomfield's speed limit on their trails is 20 miles per hour. So there's a slight difference. But Lafayette being our closest neighbor, we're in alignment with them.
Okay. And do any of our other neighbors have speed limits or not?
Adjoining, no. I think Broomfield is 20 and Lafayette is 15. I'm not sure what other communities in the county are using, if they are using any.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. I guess just one more question. I had heard about some potential e-bike legislation at the state level. Did anything actually come out of the last legislative session, or did it not make its way through?
No, nothing ever made its way through. We did have discussions with state legislators in December. Several police chiefs and I met with them to express some concerns about different community issues, and e-bike safety was one that was a common theme across multiple jurisdictions: Lafayette, Erie, Boulder, and obviously here in Louisville. So we did have those conversations in December. Had hoped that maybe there might be some action that would be taken at the state level, but unfortunately nothing had occurred. But our plan is to continue as a Chiefs Association to push that legislation forward and try to support it, because I think at the state level there's a lot of gaps within our state model traffic code as it relates to e-bikes, and I think the capabilities of e-bikes and low-powered scooters have far exceeded what anybody had anticipated back in 2017 when a lot of those statutes were written. So I think it's time for an update, and I think there's several other chiefs of police in the area that also feel the same way.
Great. Thank you very much, Chief.
Councilmember.
So would you entertain a motion, Mayor?
Not quite yet. Well, I think I've got a comment, and then you can make a motion.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been told that minors are not allowed to be given a citation for speeding. And so how would you manage to maintain a safe speed for minors? Can you give that citation to the parents, or how would that work?
So there's a few ways that it can work, and actually anybody over the age of 10 can be charged within the state. So somebody who's a teenager could potentially receive a citation. They would be, obviously they're handled as juveniles, but those cases can be brought before the municipal court, and this is a municipal statute. And so the other part of it is if there's evidence that the parent knowingly allowed their child to do, ride these bicycles or these low-powered scooters, or allow them to ride without insurance, there is a potential that we could issue citations to the parents as well.
Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for bringing this and putting all the work into it. One question, I guess two. As we move forward, will you be able, or will your officers be able to track the difference between incidents with bicycles versus e-bikes?
So we've done some, since our last meeting in August, we've been able to I've asked my sergeants to provide me on their end of shift summaries, information about e-bike contacts, any incidents involving e-bikes. And so we're starting to gather that data. Again, it is not very common or frequent that we have an actual incident. And then again, if an incident happens on a trail system, it may not be reported to us. On the state accident form, there's no distinction between e-bike and bicycle. And so even at the state level, like we can't pull out the data. We'd have to go in and manually look at the narrative to see what type of bicycle was involved. Was it an e-bike or was it a pedal bicycle?
Okay. And remind us again, what is the allowance for speed or enforcement of bicycles and e-bikes on sidewalks?
So on sidewalks, are you talking about a speed limit or are you talking about like the provisions? Like a bicycle can be on a sidewalk. They can be ridden on a sidewalk. An e-bike can be ridden on a sidewalk. There are certain areas within our community, like the downtown business district, in which bicycles are not allowed to be ridden on the sidewalk. But outside of those districts, bicycles can be ridden on a sidewalk. Bicycles do have the obligation and need to yield to pedestrians that are already established on the sidewalk. And so there is that degree of, again, kind of being a courteous rider, yielding the right-of-way to pedestrians on a sidewalk. If you're going to pass pedestrians, we have, courtesy warnings, things like that. So they can be ridden on the sidewalk. There is no restriction other than other than in the downtown business district.
Would that be part of the consideration is enforcing the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on the sidewalks as well?
No, this is specific to the Parks and Open Space Code. And so this would be specifically on parks paths, park trails, city-owned pathways within our park system. This is not an ordinance that would be enforced on general city sidewalks.
But the speed would still be recommended not to exceed on sidewalks?
The recommendation of the 15 miles an hour going up based off of what we've learned from Lafayette, and they deem that to be a reasonable and prudent speed on trails. On sidewalks, it may not be. It may be too fast for sidewalks. But there may be other provisions in our code, like reckless riding, things like that may be able to apply, or reckless behavior, which would fall into the criminals type code. But this would not be specific to sidewalks.
Does the reckless apply to cyclists that are in the road that maybe aren't in the bike lane and go into the road and are
So
creating-
a bicyclist when they're on a roadway, they're required to adhere to all the provisions of a motor vehicle. So the speed limit, riding recklessly, endangering somebody else, those are all provisions that could be enforced on a roadway. On a sidewalk, it's a little bit different because a sidewalk is not deemed to be a roadway. So there are no speed limits on sidewalks and things of that nature. So that's where we would run into that need to interpret the situation in its totality and then try to determine was there a violation that occurred or was there not. Sometimes there may not be a specific violation other than just an incident.
Thank you.
I apologize to Councilmember Hefner because it's always possible to make a motion. So if you
Yeah, I'd move the passage of ordinance number 1899, series 2025 on first reading, and that the public hearing be set for
August 5th.
at 6 p.m.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Good. Resolution number 47, Series 2025, a resolution approving the Louisville corporate campus at CTC Planned Unit Development Amendment number 2. And I want to open the public hearing. Do we have any disclosures from council members? Okay. Seeing none, we will hear the staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Emily Klein Gibson, Planner 2, with the staff presentation. This is a request to approve a PUD amendment to install solar canopies and perform other exterior alterations at 600 Tech Court with waivers to yard and bulks and sign standards. To provide a brief background, this is a second PUD amendment request for the Louisville corporate campus at CTC property, which is located off of Dillon Road in the Colorado Technical Center. The PUD was established in 2017 and includes 600, 700, and 725 Tech Court. The first amendment to this PUD was approved in 2019 and primarily included changes to Lot 1, which is the 725 Tech Court property. The proposal tonight is only for modifications to Lot 2, which is the 600 Tech Court property. The details of this proposal include installing solar canopy structures along the western front and side parking lot and the rear truck court. The request also includes installing a wall sign, which requires a waiver from maximum height requirements, expanding an existing rear mechanical yard, and installing 2 storage tanks. 3 waivers are requested in addition to the sign waiver for work related to the canopies and the storage tanks. This slide provides a visual of the proposal. The Tech Court cul-de-sac is shown to the south. The blue represents solar canopy locations. The orange represents a utility easement that expands throughout the eastern parking lot. And the brown in the rear represents the total area of the mechanical yard. Approximately 33,500 square feet of canopy structures will be installed in the western front and side parking lots and along the rear truck court. The parking lot canopies will be a maximum height of 18.75 feet, and the truck court canopies will be a maximum height of 28 feet. As part of the canopy installation, 19 trees will be removed from the parking lot. 1 additional tree will be removed from the rear mechanical yard to allow for that mechanical yard expansion. 20 new trees of similar species will be planted on the property in existing landscape areas. And the image on the right just provides an example of some of the trees that will be removed and planted in new areas, but you can find the full extent of the tree and landscape plan in the PUD documents. The mechanical yard is proposed to expand approximately 30 feet deep towards the truck court and 37 feet wide. The expansion is to allow for the installation of 2 nitrogen and argon storage tanks for the business. The proposed tanks are 45 feet tall and would be located near to existing storage tanks in the mechanical yard area. An existing 10-foot tall aluminum screening material will be continued to screen off the new mechanical area. Additionally, 1 wall sign is requested with this PUD application, and that's due to a requested waiver from the sign requirements for the maximum allowable height. The proposed sign will be 4 feet tall and located in the front of the building. So as I mentioned, there are 4 waivers included with this request. They are to allow an accessory structure front yard setback of 10 feet for the solar canopies, where a minimum of 30 feet is typically required. Also to allow a maximum height of 45 feet for the storage tanks, where a maximum accessory structure height of 25 feet is required. Similarly, they're requesting to allow a maximum height of 28 feet for the solar canopies, where the 25 feet is required. And then the maximum wall sign height of 4 feet, where a 3-foot height is required. Staff analyzed the request against applicable criteria in the Industrial Development Design Standards and Guidelines, found the request to meet all criteria aside from the waivers. Most notably, the request does not include changes to the building and site layout, and the solar canopies will not impact existing vehicle parking, truck court circulation, and pedestrian walkways. Additionally, the removed trees will prevent future issues with vegetation overgrowth, and the same number and similar species of trees will be planted on the property. Staff analysis of the waiver requests find that the waivers for the canopy height and setbacks would best facilitate the safe use of the solar panels, which will provide both solar power as well as covered parking for the building tenant. Staff also found that the proposed waiver request for the wall sign supports the intent of the sign to be visible from the closest public right-of-way, which would be Dillon Road. Planning Commission reviewed this application at a public hearing on June 12th and recommended approval as presented. And staff recommends approval of Resolution 47, Series 2025, for the Louisville Corporate Campus PUD Amendment Number 2. This concludes the staff presentation. There is no applicant presentation tonight, but I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Council, questions? Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah, thanks. I have, I think, 2 small questions. So as I understand, the solar canopies are being treated as accessory structures I assume that's what we normally do. Are they sort of formally identified as accessory structures in our code?
No, they're not formally identified. That's just a staff identification of it.
Okay, that's fine. And then do you happen to know the heights of the existing storage tanks? I'm just looking to compare them to the proposed new ones.
They're approximately 35 feet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other council questions? I just had a question. You know, when I look at this term solar canopy, it has, the image in my mind is perhaps not accurate. I looked through the materials and there's an architect's letter that talks about them as shade and solar panel shelters. Is that what your understanding is of these? And can you describe a little bit for the radio audience and council members who might be maybe a mayor who's kind of thick? Is this all utilitarian? Is it more, is there any aesthetic value to this? Can you just describe them just a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So they would be shade structures. They would, the entirety of I'll just go back here to the screen. So the entirety of the blue areas shaded would be covered by a canopy. On top of the canopy itself is where the solar panels would be located. And then it extends, I believe, about 18 feet outward. So it would cover the entirety of a parking space.
That answers my question. Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Let's take public comment. Do we have any public comment on this? No public comment. Okay. Back to council. Either questions, comments, or a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 47, series 2025, and would state and support that I think all the waiver requests make sense based on what's in the packet, and happy to have Eli Lilly & Co. as a resident here in Louisville and doing amazing things with innovation and biotechnology, I'm sure.
Second.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I would just speak in favor of the motion. It's awesome to have.
We need a second.
She did.
Oh,
Third. I just speak in support of it. Obviously, I think it's fantastic to have shaded parking and to have the solar power for the property. I think these are reasonable accommodations for it all to work, and so it's pretty straightforward, and I hope it gets done quickly, and thanks for bringing this to us.
okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. I should have closed the public hearing, but I did now. There's a motion on the floor here. Let's take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Cooperman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Councilmember Kurt,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson,
Yes.
Mayor Lay.
Yes. Right. Thank you. I think our staff member has bolted already. Good. Is she here? Oh, I'm sorry. Nice work. You were just around the back. All right, the next item is resolution, ordinance number 1896, series 2025, an ordinance amending Louisville Municipal Code section 17.72.190 regarding yard and bulk requirements for general development plans. This is second reading, so we're doing a public hearing. It was advertised on the City of Louisville website on June 16th, 2025. I'm going to open the public hearing. Any disclosures by council members on this one? Seeing none? Seeing none. Staff presentation. Director?
All right, good evening, Mayor Lay, members of City Council, Rob Zucchero, Community Development Director for the city. I'll be making the staff presentation on this ordinance. You've already heard one presentation on this, so There's not a lot new, but certainly happy to answer any questions, and I'll go over the proposal again. This is requested by Porter Care Adventist Health Systems, which owns a couple of properties in the city, as you know. Both of their properties are within the Planned Community Zone District, and there are general development plans that regulate the zoning within each of those. Our current regulations for general development plans have certain restrictions on the ability of general development plans to determine allowed building heights or other yard and bulk standards. So yard and bulk standards are heights, setbacks, lot coverage, and those types of things. The ordinance, as it exists now, says they have to be in general conformance with the underlying zoning. Doesn't get much more specific than that, but it lists a whole series of zone districts it should be in conformance with, which get defined on the GDP. This is the proposed amendment language, which would allow those general development plans to actually specify any yard and bulk standard, even if it was not in, per se, general conformance. So they could establish a new yard or bulk standard that, of course, council would have to approve it to be found acceptable for that property. So this is the language that's being proposed. The current code was originally adopted in 1983, so that's what we've been operating under. Over the years, there's been a wide range of actual yard and bulk standards approved on general development plans, but around 2010, the city started interpreting that to be a little bit more strict and say, really, if it really has to match one of those underlying zone districts, if not, you have to get a waiver through the PUD process. So the idea is that this would allow a zoning entitlement to be done through that general development plan, and that when they got to the PUD stage, they'd already have that entitlement. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't have to go through design review, but they would have more assurance of what would be acceptable to the city through that GDP process. Planned Community Zone District talks about encouraging the use of contemporary land planning principles, coordinated community design. So this is the purpose, so to speak, of general development plans. It's to do something other than the underlying zoning. So this would help actually facilitate the purpose in staff's view. GDPs do have to establish the type and character of development. If you aren't allowed to create yard and bulk standards, that limits the ability to do that through the GDP. So it could be seen as in conflict with the actual purpose of the GDP by limiting the ability to do that. So this, I would also say that this is supported by City Council's work plan. You have, even though this isn't a staff-initiated or city-initiated ordinance amendment, staff did want to point out that we believe it's consistent with this part of the City Council's work plan, where you've asked us to look at targeted code amendments prior to our comprehensive plan and what we're anticipating next year to update our land development code more comprehensively. Are there things that we could bring forward to make our processes more streamlined, provide a more clear and quicker process with more assurance for property owners? So we do think this does accomplish that as well. So Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 8th, voted unanimously to recommend approval of this request, and staff's recommending approval as drafted. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. There's representatives of the property owner here. I don't know if they have an actual presentation. They do.
First, any questions for the director? And then if not, let's go to an applicant presentation. Welcome.
You guys are projecting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the members of the council. My name is Mark Smith, and I'm CEO of Advent Health Avista at 100 Health Park Drive. We're thankful for the opportunity to talk about our application for this ordinance. As council is aware, we've recently purchased 40 acres at Red Tail, and in conjunction with our project team, we're in the early stages of planning and designing for the future at Red Tail Ridge. We have served the Louisville community at our present site for over 35 years, and we're looking forward and are excited for the design for the next many decades at our new Red Tail development. While the zoning ordinance amendment we proposed will in fact assist all planned community zone districts in Louisville in their design development, there are some additional complexities with healthcare that we'd like to speak to. These include things such as establishing how our nursing care units will operate, designing adjacencies for emergent care and trauma care, as well as bringing efficiencies to our NICU. The complexity and interlocking nature of hospital space design means that there's a tremendous downstream ripple effect if redesign is necessary. And of course, this redesign comes at significant cost. By advancing definition of our yard and bulk standards during the GDP process, we believe property owners will be able to continue to advance thoughtful design work with reasonable certainty. If the ordinance amendment is not approved and yard and bulk standards are not addressed until the PUD process, we believe there's the potential for delay in bringing patient care online due to the need for potential redesign and the expense of many millions of dollars that will need to be committed to that redesign in lieu of spending some of those same dollars on medical equipment or other services for the community. For our Red Tail Ridge Hospital design site specifically, approximately 8 months of design work will be at risk if this amendment is not passed, with the PUD not likely receiving approval until next spring. We think this code amendment allows an earlier track for owners to obtain certainty about the project by allowing thoughtful progression of our design work, which can include our comprehensive site plan, site access, and allow for progression of traffic conversations and help with building stacking. We believe all of this will in turn enhance the quality of our ultimate PUD submission later on in the process. This brings us to our final point, which is that we want to acknowledge that even if this amendment is passed, we fully recognize their design standards and city requirements during the PUD process, and that we intend to follow the proper channels and work with the city to demonstrate those project specifics as part of the PUD process. I'd like to thank the council for their consideration of the amendment and its ability to advance certainty in the design process that we believe will help us plan for the future at Advent Health. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do we have others? Questions for the applicant? Yes, Member Tim.
This might be something you can answer. If not, you can point to staff. But
Call on members of the team here.
yeah, sure, exactly. My only confusion here is, you're currently under GDP. That GDP doesn't have clear yard and bulk standards is sort of the problem. It's kind of the problem we're addressing.
Right, so their current GDP at the current Avista campus, not the Red Tail property, does have clear yard and bulk standards on the GDP. So if they ever wanted to amend those, or if they ever wanted to amend the Red Tail GDP, this would give them more leeway to propose something to council that could allow yard and bulk standards to be set on that document prior to a PUD review.
Interesting. Okay. But it would take an amendment of the GDP.
Yes.
Right. So that's it just seems like a matter of process. I get that, like, having that certainty at the GDP stage, then when you get to the PUD stage, which is later, you don't have the uncertainty at that point. But you still have to go through the process. Yes. It's just earlier in the process, so it gives you more certainty and less change. So I think that's helpful to understand. And then, of course, there's some issue around, like one entity trying to create a change for all of Louisville. But again, the idea is same process, just earlier in the process, same process of approval and defining yard and bulk, but just earlier so that it goes with the GDP as opposed to having to be asked in each PUD instance within a large GDP. So I think that makes sense. I was just trying to understand the order for you guys in particular, because that part was a little confusing, but I appreciate the teamwork there to answer that.
And I would say, if I may, that when there is a GDP amendment and you are adding yard and bulk standards, it can apply to specific areas of the GDP or specific parcels. It doesn't have to apply to the whole GDP area. And there could be different regulations even within parcels on how yard and bulk are regulated. So there's a wide range of how you might do this to get assurance that the yard and bulk are going to be acceptable, when you see the PUD come in.
other questions of the applicant or our director? Yeah, Councilmember Kern.
And I'm so sorry, I'm just going to have you clarify, just super clear, and this is going to be for staff, Mark, but thank you very much for being here, appreciate it. So should the council approve some specific GDP changes that apply for Avista's needs to move forward, we could only approve it for that and their lots where they need these things versus it applying to any and all of the lots at Red Tail Ridge.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Because this is an ordinance, oh, I didn't see it. Sorry, I didn't see it light up. I looked at it, but there we go. Councilmember Cooperman, please.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question following up on Councilmember Dickinson. So, let's see how to phrase it best. So supposing that we pass this ordinance tonight, and then someone comes in to amend a GDP, are you saying, Director Zuccaro, that passing the ordinance would give them more flexibility in what they put into that GDP amendment?
That's correct. Yes, when it comes to yard and bulk, they'd have more flexibility of what they could request.
And could you just make that a little bit more specific? Like, you know, if we didn't pass this, what would be limiting them, given our current code, essentially?
Right, so you'd have to go to one of those underlying zone districts that are listed and say, what's a comparable district and what would be the allowed height? So a lot of our zoning districts are limited to 35 feet in height. So any development on the GDP, it would have to say you can't go above 35 feet on the GDP, even though the intent of the development might, that's pretty much a short 3 stories for commercial development. So if somebody actually wanted to develop taller than 3 stories, or taller, even a tall 3-story might be over 35 feet with mechanical screening and things like that. They wouldn't have the ability necessarily to do that until they got to the PUD process.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Two questions. So this does not take away the ability to request these yard and bulk standards at the PUD step. That option's still there.
That option is still there, yes. You could bypass the GDP amendment, come in with your PUD and ask for waivers.
If someone were to request a GDP amendment, could that then trigger the opportunity for some sort of referendum or something for that? Or is it just for the whole GDP for which that could happen?
Right. Yeah, we do consider a GDP a change of zoning. It's adopted by ordinance, so it is subject to referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll take public comment. Because this is an ordinance, we do 2 rounds of public comment. Just because you don't speak on the first round doesn't mean you can't speak in the second, and vice versa. You can speak at both rounds if you like. Speakers limited to 3 minutes and 6. Do we even have people? Nope. So any other further questions from council members? All right, then we'll go to a second round. Anybody decide to come forward? All right.
Mayor Lay, I apologize.
It looks like there is one. It looks like Ms. Krantz.
Tamar.
Thank you. This is Tamar Krantz. I live in Louisville, and I apologize. I jumped in late on this conversation, but I don't know that Councilmember Kern got an answer to her question. Why I think that the applicant can apply for a GDP amendment, and they can ask for over 100 feet in height on their GDP, and we don't need this to apply to all GDPs in Louisville. this is not straightforward. If the applicant wants to change their lot and their property, they don't need to, we don't need to change things for the entire city. So I don't think there's any reason why they can't just make a GDP amendment, and if they don't want to do a GDP amendment, they could present you with a PUD. If they present you with a PUD or even a GDP amendment, you can understand where on their lot they want to put the excess height, how they want to design it, rather than just saying, let's just make everything in line with the comprehensive plan. I don't feel the public process on the comprehensive plan has been extraordinarily robust, and I think that we're going to end up with allowing 5 stories at Red Tail Ridge. So what you're doing basically is saying, let's make the comprehensive plan take precedence over the yard and bulk standards that have been in our code. It's very easy to ask a waiver, and of course it would be easier for them not to have to do a GDP amendment and not to ask for a waiver on the PUD, but this seems like a ridiculous way to do it. I feel like this also goes around, this should not be a quasi-judicial hearing. This is a legislative item, and I really feel strongly that this should come back to you as a legislative item, so I would have the opportunity to discuss it with my council members. It's really obscure, and that's probably why I'm the only one who's showed up to talk about it today, but I don't feel this is a very straightforward process. Thanks for taking my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Krantz. Is this a legislative matter? Okay,
Yes, it is.
Thank you. It is an appropriate time to take up this matter, actually, as a matter of process. So do we have, let's go back to, unless we've got any further public comments, do we have? No. All right. Back to council. Mayor Pro Tem?
I think for whatever reason in my 6 years, this one kind of confused me more than a lot. I was just like, I don't really get this, but I feel like I have more clarity now, and I appreciate that. And what I understand from this is, again, a little bit, this is not skirting any process. This is not avoiding or getting to do something. It certainly isn't applying to every GDP in the city or anything like that. It is just a matter of changing the timing of which these things can be determined. And in some ways, it's even more public process because, as you pointed out, this is subject to referendum. So if you come in and try to establish more specific yard and bulk standards for your GDP and people don't like it, it can actually go to referendum. So in some ways, it's riskier in that can happen. But what I'm hearing, and is very clear, and what we're trying to do a lot of is reduce uncertainty. So it is not to grease the wheels or make it like somehow automatic or easy to get these things, but to make it more consistent and to make it more reliable so that you know what you're getting earlier in the process. And I think that's a really important thing. So I really, after some earlier confusion myself, I feel like I have a little bit more clarity on, it's really just a when this conversation is happening and not if, or like it's, yeah, again, now I'm starting to repeat myself, but I'm feeling quite good about this change, and I think it's very public facing and very transparent, and we'll have to have good conversations, and they'll have to come for these asks in one way, shape, or form, and this just gives more versatility. And someone asked a great question of, could they still, Hamilton asked, can they still make adjustments at the PUD stage? And they can. You don't have to. That would be maybe problematic. But you must set these at GDP and cannot come at the PUD. Like that would be problematic. But now you can do both. You can do either or both. So I think it's fantastic, and I'll be supporting it whenever someone makes a motion, or I'll make it.
Other comments? Councilmember Hefner.
I'm going to go ahead and move to approve ordinance number 1896, series 2025, as it is before us. And
Second.
in support, I'm just going to agree with the Mayor Pro Tem, and I think this, like our sketch plan process and other things we're trying to do, is another effort at moving those costly decisions about overall design concept much earlier in the process, so that we're not waiting till the final public hearing on a development project to say, oh, well, you came to us with 3 stories, but really we wanted 1. So go back and redesign. I mean, that moving this stuff up in the process, I think, is a big improvement for everyone.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion and the comments. I agree. One of our goals has been to streamline and make this a better process for staff as well as for businesses trying to develop. I too, like the Mayor Pro Tem, was a little concerned with this initial wording and how it came through. Hence, I appreciate the clarification. And I believe that to kind of ease some of the public concern, there is a lot of public input. It is still not going to be like, we'll be more specific. If a Vista comes, wants to make some changes to Redtail, it doesn't have to apply to every building that goes in Redtail. It can go just to this GDP, and there can be additional changes made and still have to be approved, but it lets everybody early do this. I'm very happy, and I'm actually glad that you brought it so that, that we can facilitate the movement of a Vista. Thank you.
I would just add, thanks to staff for finding this, recognizing this as a good opportunity to, I think, make the process better. We have worked and will continue to work very hard, just generally, on making processes more consistent, more reliable, more predictable, as least expensive as we possibly can, and as fast as we can, so we can make a decision, let people do what they want to do, or if not, we get a decision to them and they need to come back or change things or decide maybe it's not a good thing to proceed. So I'm in favor. Let's take a roll call.
Councilmember Fahy.
Yes.
Councilmember Kern.
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yes.
Mayor Lay.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentations, and we'll move on. Our next item is ordinance number 1897, series 2025, an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse development. This is the second reading and public hearing. This was advertised in the City of Louisville website on June 16th, 2025 as well. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Councilors, Matt Post, Senior Planner, Community Development Team. This is the second reading. If you recall, I did do a presentation on that first reading. This one will be a bit more in depth. Don't hesitate to cut me off if you've heard what I've said previously, and we can continue on. But this one will be a bit more in depth than the previous presentation. So before we denied is approval of ordinance 1897, series 2025, approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Municipal Code concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse developments. As you all recall, this ordinance is a direct result of House Bill 241304, which was adopted by the Colorado General Assembly in 2024. The bill requires that local governments located within metropolitan planning organizations eliminate their minimum parking requirements in their zoning ordinances and design guidelines for new multifamily and residential adaptive reuse projects that are in areas identified as applicable transit service areas. City of Louisville is, of course, within an MPO, and there were 44 transit stops identified within the city that were also identified as ATSAs, or those applicable transit service areas. As the bill is written, we are no longer permitted to enforce parking minimums as of June 30th. So we have technically stopped enforcing those parking minimums, although we haven't received any applications where that's been a relevant topic. The House bill applies to properties within the city that at least partially intersect with areas identified as having applicable transit service. Again, as a reminder, those applicable transit service areas are identified as areas within a quarter mile of a transit stop where service is provided at intervals of 30 minutes or less during peak transit hours. So the lines here in the city of Louisville that would qualify would be Route 228 that runs along via Appia that serves Broomfield, Louisville, and Lafayette. We have the Dash Route that serves the South Boulder Road corridor. And then, of course, the Flatiron Flyer that serves US 36 and McCaslin. The ATSAs are depicted on the screen here via this buffer map. All of the areas highlighted that you can see are reflective of the existing transit stops. And then, of course, that full quarter-mile buffer area where we are now prohibited from enforcing parking minimums. This map was generated with data provided by DOLA in conjunction with the Colorado Department of Energy and then RTD as well. So within those ATSAs, we may no longer enforce parking minimums for, more specifically, any new multifamily development, any new mixed-use development which contains an element of multifamily, although we may still require parking for a commercial or non-residential element of a new mixed-use building. And then we may no longer require minimum parking for residential adaptive reuses, and that would also apply to residential adaptive reuses where at least 50% of the floor area is dedicated to residential uses. Adaptive reuse is defined by the bill as a conversion of an existing structure from the use for which it was constructed to a new use by maintaining elements of the structure and adapting such elements to a new use. So just bluntly put, it's the reuse of an existing building. With this new ordinance, it is important to note that although we are prohibited from enforcing parking minimums, developers may still voluntarily provide parking for those listed uses. We'll discuss that further and in later slides on what staff's opinion is of that. Some background on the bill here. In addition to the prohibition on parking minimums for the listed uses, the law also clarifies that nothing prevents a local jurisdiction from requiring parking in compliance with affordable housing conditions. Typically, there would be a condition for parking that would be attached to funding for affordable housing. Nothing in the bill prohibits us from actually requiring funding when we have an affordable project. The law also does not prohibit us from requiring bicycle parking, and then it does not prevent a local jurisdiction from requiring ADA spaces, although we touched on this previously. We can't require those spaces unless parking is voluntarily provided. Again, we did confirm that with DOLA. Just through previous conversations, the same standard applies for electric vehicle parking. We cannot require electric vehicle parking in any ratio that our code defines unless parking is voluntarily provided on site. Moving through the bill here, the bill does not define multifamily. It specifically states in DOLA guidance that we may use our own definition so long as it is not substantially different from the state's definition. The city's definition of multifamily is a building used by two or more families living independently of each other in two dwelling units that does not include hotels, motels, or resorts. This definition is almost identical to the state's definition, so staff elected not to update the multi-unit or multifamily definition as it is indirectly in line with the state's definition. Staff did not propose any other definitions with this particular ordinance. We didn't necessarily cover this, I believe, in the first reading, but a bit of background when it comes to zoning and review processes for multifamily, mixed-use, residential, and residential adaptive reuse projects within these applicable transit service areas. So staff will continue to utilize our current land use requirements and allowances within the zoning ordinance to determine whether or multi-unit or multifamily use is actually permitted in any zone district, and then whether or not that's a use by right or a special review use. Number of zone districts within the applicable transit service areas allow multi-unit or multifamily dwellings as a special review use. As the council is aware, a special review use includes additional criteria to ensure that a proposed use is located accordingly and that it doesn't have negative impacts on adjacent and surrounding uses based on the context of an area or the particular zoning type that's applied. It's important to note that parking minimums may not be imposed. They still may be imposed as a condition of an approved special review use, even if a multifamily dwelling is only allowed as a special review use. So conditions are a common application in special review use applications. And so again, we cannot impose parking minimums. Zone districts where multi-unit or multifamily dwellings are permitted as a special review use include most of our single-family residential zone districts, including residential estate, residential low density, rural residential, business office, commercial business, commercial corridor, and then commercial neighborhood. Now, most of those zone districts may allow for additional dwelling units, but they are limited by the number of dwelling units per acre that would actually be allowed in those areas. So, for example, we may have a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet and a minimum lot size per dwelling unit of 7,500 square feet, right? So we don't anticipate a significant increase or requests or increases in additional dwelling units in these areas. It's just a quirk of our code where multi-unit dwellings are permitted. Again, our definition of multi-unit dwelling would technically allow a duplex in some of these locations if there is a lot size that's large enough to accommodate those additional dwelling units. So other multifamily and multi-unit dwellings, again, are permitted as by right uses in the residential medium density zone district, residential high density mixed use residential, and then of course in some of our planned community zone districts. These areas are generally more appropriate for higher density uses. This is where staff anticipates that if we do see any developers taking advantage of the prohibition on parking minimums, that we would see them in these particular zone districts, which also do align with our primary corridors and existing transit service areas. Some additional analysis here. So again, we are no longer enforcing parking minimums as of June 30th. We also did some analysis into our existing policy documents and found that our previously adopted plans, including the housing plan, actually, again, support the state's efforts to reduce parking. And then more specifically, our housing plan does identify minimum parking requirements as a barrier to additional housing development occurring within the city. Study indicates that parking minimums increase development costs, reduce buildable area on constrained sites, and then negatively impact project feasibility of projects, especially in areas near transit or where parking demand is generally lower. That study included modeling as part of a feasibility analysis and demonstrated that reduced parking requirements had a greater positive impact on project viability than increased building heights. And so when we see that higher project feasibility, we see a greater financial feasibility of the project, but then increases the likelihood that that project moves forward to completion. So again, highlighted in the housing study that reduced parking requirements lead to better financial feasibility, which then in turn leads to that higher likelihood that those projects move forward. The study continued on recommending that lower parking ratios or recommended lower parking ratios and parking related incentives, again, specifically in transit corridors and within downtown Louisville. Of course, those transit corridors and downtown Louisville directly correspond with the applicable transit service areas that are identified by the bill. Some additional analysis, as mentioned, the developers may still voluntarily provide parking. And staff anticipate, as we discussed previously, that most eligible projects will continue to include off-street parking just as a matter of practicality and the fact that we are a more suburbanized community. We anticipate parking to continue to be provided just for market feasibility and then the long-term leasability and sales prospects of those particular projects. Moving on here, I think, we talked about financing requirements a little bit. I think we've, had some discussions with developers where we've actually encouraged them to reduce their parking. We talked about this last time, where a lot of times their response to us is it's actually a condition of their financing that they provide parking. So again, we fully anticipate that we'll continue to see parking provided. With the prohibition of parking minimums, we also recognize that this may result in additional impacts with the risk of spillover parking in adjacent neighborhoods, I think as we highlighted in the staff report, the actual impacts are uncertain, and we do not know what they will look like, and they'll obviously vary by project location and project type. I think the best staff can do at this time will monitor development trends and then evaluate any policy responses as we see any issues pop up, again, if folks do take advantage of the prohibition on parking. So as far as updates to the actual code are concerned, we updated section 1720 of the municipal code, which specifically regulates off-street parking. We included a provision indicating that off-street parking for qualifying projects is no longer applicable. We also included a provision indicating that this new ordinance supersedes any existing design guidelines, any existing PUDs or GDPs where parking was previously entitled. And of course, this would only apply to those applicable transit service areas. We updated a couple additional sections. Downtown Louisville specifically, again, downtown Louisville is fully encompassed by the applicable transit service area. So parking will no longer be required for those particular use types. And then we added language that will tie all that together, essentially. And so with that, if you all recall, quick update, Councilor Hefner, I think you expressed an interest and the council agreed to continue to study eliminating parking minimums citywide. Staff have added that to our rolling work plan, and so we're currently working on analyzing that, and we'll have a discussion and direction back at some point here. I don't have a date on that yet, but it is on our work plan to continue working on to bring back to you all for further discussion. On May 8th, the Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously of this ordinance, and staff continue to recommend approval of Ordinance 1897, Series 2025, approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the LMC concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse development. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Council members, any questions for staff? Okay. This too is an ordinance, so we have 2 rounds of public comment. It looks like before, I think I missed Councilmember Cooperman. Sorry about that. Did you have a question for staff?
Yes. So one small question first. Are these amendments to our codes written in such a way that they sort of automatically update with the evolving ATSAs?
Yes, the code specifically references the ATSAs as identified by DOLA. The bill identifies DOLA as the agency which will determine the ATSAs, yes.
Okay. And then one other question, which you sort of touched on at various places in your presentation. So let's say someone comes in with a proposal for a new development and they do decide to build less parking than we currently require, but maybe some. That frees up some space on their lot, right? And so could you give me a little bit more of an impression for how the developer would be able to use that additional space?
Sure, I would imagine that developer would use that additional space for additional dwelling units on site. I think one of the factors that would lead to that would be the savings in cost from kind of what a developer would refer to as otherwise wasted space with parking areas. But I think a lot of times we're working with these groups, we see that when less parking is required, they're able to get more dwelling units out of those spaces more often than not.
Right, but they could still run up into zoning restrictions on the number of units, right?
That's absolutely right. They're still limited by the densities that currently exist in our zoning ordinance. You're right, Councilor, yes.
Okay, so I don't know. I mean, this is pretty hypothetical, but if most of the developments do seem to want to max out, right, the number of units that they can get, even with our parking minimums. So I don't know, if they did that, then they would just have more landscaping, or I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. I think maybe the point you're getting at there is there are a number of other limiting factors that contribute to a lack of dwelling units. It goes well beyond just parking. Again, we have density limitations. We have affordable housing requirements. We have other fee provisions that apply when additional dwelling units are included. So we may see a scenario where additional landscaping or additional softscape is provided as opposed to additional hardscape, which I think is still generally a site development positive if we're seeing a reduction in impervious surface. But I think it's yet to be determined. But to your point, there are a number of factors that actually impact the number of dwelling units that are on site. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. I mean, it might just be worthwhile thinking about some of these implications as we move ahead with, some other considerations. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Cooperman. Let's move at this point to public comment. I don't see anybody. Do you? I don't see anybody. Do we have somebody? Yep, there we go. I was waiting for that because Good.
Hi, this is Tamara Krantz again. I see that in this presentation that this code very efficiently complies with the law. It makes it very clear, and it's a very easy step for you to take to comply with the state law and institute these getting rid of parking minimums. But I think that if you look at the legislative purpose in the House bill, that it's a lot more than just creating more housing, and we understand. One of the reasons they want to do this is to get more cars off the road, to increase the use of public transit, to increase bicycles, to discourage car use, and all the great benefits that come along with that, like our health and our air quality and global warming and reducing the amount of impervious surfaces. All that is part of the purpose of this legislation. I feel just like House Bill 1313, it really fails to look at the bigger picture. So I'm asking you right now, if you guys, while you're doing this, if you'd like to look at ways to achieve those goals, in addition to just getting rid of the parking minimums. In some cases, you might want to set a parking maximum. You might want to make sure that developments that do take advantage of this, of no minimums and producing less housing, add more green space and don't just maximize the amount of space that they're developing towards housing. I made some suggestion in an email that I sent you that you could require more bicycle parking. You could require that they orient their development towards public transit so that the entrance is close to the bus stop, and provide covered walkways, or even provide make sure that they're providing a bus stop. I think there's a lot more that you could do to actually work with the spirit of this act. Otherwise, I feel like it's kind of a wasted opportunity. I feel like, and in addition, by signing on to this, you're making the same move as other communities might be doing, to accept that the state has authority over home rule cities to just tell us how to do things. So we could just make a really quick, easy decision to implement this and comply with the law. Or you can make it so that it works for Louisville towards the purpose of not just adding more housing, but getting us out of vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krantz. Anyone else on public comment? Okay, let's go back to council questions and comments. Doesn't look like there are any, so we'll go back to a second round of public comment. Do we have anybody wanting to make a?
No.
Okay, seeing none, let's come back to council. Any thoughts? Yes, Councilmember Hefner.
Yeah, look, I'm going to support this. I think this represents sort of the bare minimum of what we have to do under state law. I think we ought to do more. As I said the last time, I think some of the staff presentation was illuminating in that regard, that this is something that literally costs us nothing, that helps with housing affordability. And, given the conversation we just had downstairs, I don't see why, at the very least, we would expand this ordinance to be citywide rather than just that narrow corridor. And beyond that, I would suggest expanding it to cover other types of development beyond the sort of legislative compromise reached by the state, which I think I agree with Tamar that the compromise reached by the state may not be the compromise that's best for Louisville. And certainly they haven't tied our hands in terms of doing more than what they specifically required. The example that always comes to mind for me is if you were building downtown Louisville today, you couldn't do it with our commercial parking minimums. You just couldn't do it. It wouldn't be possible. It would be isolated buildings surrounded by seas of parking, as we have in many other parts of town, where the seas of parking sit there and get hot all day in the sun because nobody's parking on them. And to continue to think that that is the best style of development for Louisville, to me, is a mistake and a missed opportunity. But I will be supporting this.
Other comments? Councilmember Kern.
I appreciated actually Tamar's comments and us doing more, but I think Councilmember Hefner made a good point that part of this is to improve affordability for new residential construction. And I think putting additional requirements, although meeting the sentiment of reducing the need for a vehicle, they might just add to the cost. Which is one of the things we're trying to reduce. I have to admit, though, I would be in favor of making this a citywide, where we remove for residential multifamily instead of just in the transit corridor areas.
Any other comments?
Councilmember Cooperman has his hand raised.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Thanks. I very much agree with Councilmember Huffner's comments. I just wanted to add, I think a lot of the suggestions that Tamar Krantz offered are things that we should be thinking about with our comprehensive plan. I think at the moment, I think we just need to comply with the state law, and I think in this case that we should, so I will be supporting this. But I think our comprehensive plan and other considerations offer an opportunity to push forward those ideas. Thanks.
Thanks. Yes, Member Tim.
I think this is long overdue, and we talked about, even some commercial development, the parking minimums are still, too high, requiring, we've had lots of people come in, like, we just do not need this much parking. Can we please have less? It's not even that we want more building. It's just, we do not need this much parking. And so, I support this citywide. My question to staff would be, does that make you nervous for us to be having that conversation right now? Would you rather that come back through the comp plan and have that? Is that a simple enough thing to do at another time, or is that a simple enough thing? We have at least 3, maybe 4 people who have said that we're comfortable with this citywide. What's the best way forward? Are we jumping the gun is my question.
I don't know that we're jumping the gun. I think that, probably Director Zucchero and myself can have additional conversations with the city manager about what it looks like to bring forward those changes. I know we do have land use regulations update on the horizon. So it's interesting to consider how we'll approach that, just knowing that that's on the docket here coming down the line. But I think we have additional conversations to be had for sure.
And I think what you're recommending maybe is continuing this for an amendment to apply it citywide also as an option.
I think either way, I mean, I think passing this tonight as is and great, this is great, and then giving direction to clearly come back as quickly as possible or in the most efficient, timely way, that there seems to be enough energy on council for this to be citywide. So again, if tonight is the right time, great. If you'd like it to be a part of something coming very soon, I think that's reasonable. Delaying this one, we're not going to not say yes to this. I don't know if there's a benefit to delaying this one. So
the only benefit would be some process efficiency, and I know the state deadline for compliance with the state laws come and gone. We're a little bit behind on that. But, we could, if a housing development came in, we could, we wouldn't enforce it. There's other mechanisms to do it if we wanted to delay this and bring back an amendment that would apply it citywide. I think you could continue the meeting, and I'd ask the city attorney if that was okay to continue it for amendments or if we'd want to renotice it. But I think that this is, I would just say, we haven't put a lot of thought or analysis into it, but it is very common for other cities to do it. It's very typical. I think my initial reaction is the market's going to take care of it from the opinion of the planning staff here, and it's probably low risk as far as community impact for multifamily not to have parking minimums.
I have a question about that. Is, assuming that either we pass it tonight as is, or we continue it, but you do extra work to look into parking, ending parking minimums throughout Louisville. What are you going to study? What do you
So
need?
I think, typically if we do any ordinance amendment, we would, our due diligence is looking at what other cities do, bringing analysis, bringing options. We run it through Planning Commission, then through City Council. So there's all this public process for a typical ordinance amendment. So, the alternative is if you wanted to continue this and request an amendment to, make an amendment, continue this hearing for the purpose of making an amendment to apply this citywide, that would, be more efficient as far as bringing that amendment forward.
I think, well, yes, Councilmember Hefner, go ahead.
I would just suggest for everyone's consideration that there's really only two places in the draft that refer to ATSAs. And if you just delete those two sections, the two portions of them that refer to ATSAs, the rest of the ordinance still works. And if others would be open to it, I'd suggest we take a 10-minute break, let planning staff confer with the city attorney and see if they can get us something right now.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I'm in support of what we have in front of us tonight to meet minimums. This, Director Zuccaro went through, sorry, Rob, what we have tonight went through Planning Commission?
Correct.
Correct. So if we were to change this to be more broad, it would not go through Planning Commission if we deleted those two things, ASTA, and just approved it tonight.
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, I personally would like to have a little more information. My ideal world is this is a fairly significant change, although we think it might be low risk because the developers will want to make sure they have enough parking on site. I would like for Planning Commission to give their stamp of approval on it. So that's just where I stand on this. I'm not against it, but I just feel like it just feels rushed doing it right now from the dais tonight.
Any other comments? I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure there's no other. I share concerns of, pardon me? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, in response to my Ward 3 colleague, I think we frequently change things that make changes from the recommendation from Planning Commission without sending it back to them.
Yeah. Because you can do duplexes.
Including on ordinances.
Yeah. So.
Comment?
Whenever appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, we just had some more thoughts on amending it now.
Why don't I get Councilmember Cooperman's comment?
Yeah, just a brief comment. I mean, while I am essentially in favor of extending this to the whole city, if we made that amendment tonight, we would not get any public input on that particular amendment, I believe. Is that correct?
Just multifamily development. Let's clarify that, make sure that we're on the same page.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that is correct.
So one clarification is, I think what the proposal is this would apply to all multifamily, not all land uses, just multifamily. And then just, here's an example that you may not have thought of, is just like in Old Town, the zone district for the majority of Old Town does allow, let's say, duplexes, that zone district. So theoretically, if you this could be okay too, but theoretically you could build a duplex on an Old Town lot where it's allowed pretty broadly if you have a big enough lot, and then you would, it would eliminate any requirements for off-street parking for those properties. So that's something where we might want to be a little more thoughtful because of our definition of multifamily. But it could also be okay depending on your view of what's appropriate for Old Town.
Thank you. Yes, I'm leaning toward Barbara's comments that doing this from the dais is challenging, and these issues like the duplexes in downtown is probably only one thing that will come up. And so I would be in favor of passing it as it is tonight and then looking into future changes that we could do when it comes up. I mean, we could even wait until someone decided to build something that wasn't in the transit area and say, okay, we're going to require this much, or we're not going to require any parking minimums.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, Judy pointed out that probably 99% of downtown is already included in the transportation area, right? So like, that's already going to be a thing because the bus route goes right through downtown. So that particular one, but I think, to your point, there might be other examples. I just think, generally speaking, this is, like I said, I think this is not seismic. This is more like, this is already covering, let's say, half of the developable area anyway, and all we're saying is, this is generally a good principle. We want to apply it citywide, and I don't think that's as big of a change, because again, developers are not building 20 units with zero parking like that. They won't be able to sell their units, so that isn't really the issue. It's just we overpark everything, and this is a very easy way to stop overparking everything, and it complies or aligns with everything else we're doing. So I think it's pretty simple. I support it. It doesn't, as we know, it doesn't have to be 7-0, but I think to Barbara's point, if there are problems with this, if we need more time to study it, I'm not totally opposed to that. I just feel like if this is simple enough, we can be done with the simple process. We can continue and have another conversation in a week or 2 or 3, but it's a continuation of this meeting. And so in that sense, public comment would occur again, correct? If we were to engage in a continuation of this meeting?
Correct, but you wouldn't have the planning commission
Yeah.
input just as.
But to Josh's, I guess, point or question, there would be another opportunity for public comment if we don't make the decision tonight. Instead, we continue this meeting to a later date and with that amendment, and we'll be able to discuss that amendment with public comment that night. And then, Barbara, to your point, it would not go back to planning commission, but it would be a little bit more efficient and still allow for public comment. So that would be what I would support.
Councilmember Kern.
And the members of the planning commission then, it wouldn't be a separate public hearing, but they could certainly participate in public comment or email in and give us some additional, if they had concerns with expanding this statewide, that's cute, Judy, citywide, we would be able to hear from them then.
Councilmember Hefner.
Yeah, I would just say, look, this is coming back to us either way with a broader consideration. If there's that much heartburn about extending it citywide, let's just wait for it to come back. But to me, it's literally 2 sections. It's an easy fix. We could redline it right now and do something that's a net improvement that I don't know what the additional questions would even be. The transit areas are arbitrary. We didn't get to pick those. It's not like they have some special meaning to anyone. It's arbitrary. But if we're not going to do it now, I'd say let's pass it clean and come back to it when we come back to it. But I don't think we need to extend tonight and then also come back to it later. That's a lot of meetings about this.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I guess I have a couple of points. One is, I'm fine with the statute or the ordinance as it's written. I don't have really strong energy around either extending it or not. The thing that maybe troubles me a little bit, or would trouble me about making the easy change, I think there's no question it's an easy change to make. It's a couple of words, and it's easy to redline that if we had to do it tonight. But I am concerned about the public process. I mean, I'm not sure it needs to go back to Planning Commission. I think it would be good to get public input, and I think the staff could provide some additional information. They provided a suggestion of where it might be, where there might be a question. Maybe it's not the right example, but my bet, we're talking to them on the fly. They haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't know, my own preference, I'll go with whatever council wants to do here. I think we're already past the deadline that the state has set. I think we should continue the hearing, come back with this information, and just pass the whole thing as we decide to do it. Because I think there's at least some, I haven't heard anybody on council saying, absolutely, we should not extend this under any circumstances in any way in the future. Nobody said that. So I think there's interest in that. But I think the way I hear Councilmember Hamilton's point is that, there's value in getting public input. And we've got, with all respect, we've one person in the gallery and we have very few online. And I think giving people an opportunity is not a bad thing on the way to passing this. So that's my own input. So I'll make a motion, and then we can kind of go forward from there, which would be to continue tonight's hearing to a date certain with the direction to staff to provide language for an amendment, an amended version, and any additional information about what the impact of making such a change, that is, taking away parking minimums citywide, what impact that would have, if any significant impact. So and the date certain would be?
August 5th.
Is that time enough? Staff says yes. There's consultation going on right now. Let's consult.
Second.
Okay, it looks like staff is in unanimous agreement that they can manage that deadline. So that would be 6 p.m. on August 5th.
Second.
Okay, comments? Yes.
Just a question. So is what's coming back on August 5th, is that intended to have the broader discussion about additional land use categories like commercial, or is that just what we're talking about tonight, taking our bare minimum and making it slightly less minimum? Citywide. Okay, but the intention isn't to supplant coming back later with yet additional analysis on commercial and other land use categories?
Yeah. I think that's my intention in what I said.
Fair enough.
Any other comment? All right. Let's take wait a second. I didn't need to close it. Anyway, let's take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey.
Yes.
Councilmember Kern.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Yes.
Mayor Lay.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner.
Yes.
Good. Good discussion. City Attorney's report.
Nothing from me tonight.
All right. Council members, do you have for future agenda items that we want to identify tonight? No? Seeing none, entertaining an amendment.
A motion to,
It's just, I just came back from vacation.
I move to adjourn?
Yes, thank you. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Good. Thank you all.
all but losing the cultural identity that made it unique. And yet, while its coal fields disappear beneath rows of new homes, shopping center, senior recreation